If you're the same age as me and are or were into Yu-Gi-Oh, I would ask two questions. First, did you remember to use the wedge pillow under your knees to alleviate 50 pounds of weight on your back so that you do not wake up stiff? Please be sure to do that, we are old. And secondly, when you think of Yu-Gi-Oh, what are the things that immediately come to mind? Most people would say Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, the Exodia Obliterate scene, Yu-Gi-Oh Bridged, and possibly the Power of Friendship. The last one was a long-running theme and joke tossed around for Yu-Gi-Oh's original series, Duel Monsters. What if I said that GX not only expanded on it, but did it better? This Yu-Gi boomer is going to learn you a thing or two. A protagonist can only be as interesting as the rest of the cast around him. The friend group that Judai surrounds himself with does a fairly good job of illustrating high school life and the friends that are around you. Sho represents the meek one with a heart of gold, Manjome is the natural rival, Asuka is the obligatory love interest, Misawa is the smart one, Ryu is the older brother figure, and Fubuki is the guy that gets all the bitches. Season 2 expands the roster to include the rambunctious Kenzan and the serious Edo Phoenix. By Season 3, we have the conditional friend in Jim, the guy that respects what you're about in O'Brien, and the one that ends up being the closest thing to a blood brother, Johan. Because of the diversity in the cast, we can see the type of person Judai is. He is a joyful, fun-loving kind of guy that brings people together through good vibes and never takes life too seriously. He's the first person to help someone and the last one to get angry. But this video isn't about Judai. This video is about everyone else. In Season 3, Judai faces some serious situations where he makes grave mistakes. If you don't know by now, Judai must confront the apparent deaths of his friends through the course of the second half of the season. He spirals into despair and is no longer that fun-loving guy from the previous 2 seasons. The key part of this season isn't the dark trials that Judai endures, it's the push he gets from his friends to see his mission through. Let's start with Sho. At the beginning of the series, he is weak, mild-mannered, and tags along with Judai. It takes a tag team duel to help him understand that he has the talent as a duelist and that he has the potential to become good, despite the fact that he uses Vehicroids. In Season 2, he is able to embrace more of the latent potential and is promoted from Osiris Red to Raw Yellow as proof of growth. In Season 3, he is good enough to go to Obelisk Blue, but decides to stay in Raw Yellow as he is not yet ready for the move up. The reason that this is important is because he shows growth despite being in the shadow of his brother and seen as the sidekick to Judai. When Judai is at his worst, Sho reveals that he saw him as the son. He essentially idolized Judai for being the ideal version of a big brother compared to Ryu, and ran away once he saw darker aspects of Judai's character. After wandering around alone in the different dimension, Sho is saved by his actual brother and receives a stern talking to.
Judaiの夢を見ていた。お兄さん。ショー、かつて俺にデュエルを挑んできたことがあったな。ヘルカイザーとなった俺を地獄から連れ戻すと言って。だが今は10代の元から逃げ出そうとしている。
Ryu is a much more direct person that doesn't mince his words. He asked why Sho was so willing to help him from the darkness but would not help Judai. This hits home for Sho as there is no good answer from walking away from his best friend. Speaking of Ryu, he is the older brother figure for Judai. In Season 1, he sees the bottomless potential for Judai and he earns Ryu's respect for putting up a fight in their first duel and drawing with him in the second duel. Ryu sees that Judai's way of looking at the world positively and trying to have fun duels continues to push him to become a better duelist. This presents itself in an ugly way in Season 3 as Ryu sees Judai at his lowest, where he is traumatized from his time as the Supreme King. Judai attempts to keep pushing forward, but he no longer has the same determination and Ryu stops him from advancing. The Marufuji brothers see Judai at his worst. They both approach him in different ways that fit their character and in the way their bond had been established since Season 1. Sho is resolute in following Judai to the end to see his fate, but does not directly speak to him. Ryu cuts through the nonsense and challenges Judai to attempt to bring out the young man that was so willing to duel. The latter effort isn't able to help Judai and it makes things worse. Judai abandons his mission and goes back to the place where his friends had died.
Manjome, Asuka, Ken-san, Fubuki-san. 俺はどうすればいいんだ。答えてくれ。俺の罪をどうやって償えば。理解だ。教えてくれ。
It isn't until later that Ryu puts his own life on the line where Judai is able to see through actions what Ryu was trying to say during their duel. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, we do need to talk about two other characters. Johan is the guy that is legitimately seen as Judai's equal. They strike up an immediate friendship and spend a lot of time together during the first half of Season 3. In small sample sizes, Johan is seen as a carefree, fun-loving duelist that is soft-spoken and has a willingness to help a friend in need. Johan acts the same way Judai does. He isn't afraid to stick up for his friends or take danger head on to protect them. Johan feels sympathy for duel spirits and has a strong connection with them like Judai. He even duels Yubel along with them, and Johan is the one to save the school and return them to their dimension. By all means, Johan is him, and Judai finally has a peer that he can consider an equal. That is why Judai feels so much pain for not being able to bring back Johan from the different dimension.
Johan, 今行く。どんなことをしてもお前を連れ戻す。
This causes the chain of events of Judai making reckless and selfish decisions that lead to the deaths of Manjome, Asuka, Kenzan, and Fubuki. This leads to Sho's disillusionment of Judai, and Ryu's anger towards him cowering from responsibilities. Jim Crocodile plays a small but important role between these events. He is another duelist in the mold of Kenzan where he knows how to have fun and knows when to get serious. He also speaks a little bit of English and will say a couple lines here and there to remind us he spent a week in Australia. It is cute. During the Dark World arc, Jim remembers a prophecy an old man had once given him. Jim will help a friend in need and perform a miracle. When Jim and O'Brien discover that the Supreme King is Judai himself, Jim remains steadfast in wanting to help him from the darkness. When O'Brien asks why, he provides the simplest of answers.
いや、そんな使命感とか自己犠牲とかの気持ちじゃない。俺はただ友達を救いたいだけなんだ。
Judai was nice to his crocodile companion, Karen. Sometimes the simplest of things are the biggest acts of kindness you can do for another person. Jim knows that Judai is a good person and that darkness has swallowed him. Judai needs an act of kindness in return.
そうだ、Judai。お前は覇王という熱い地層に閉じ込められてしまった魂。俺が必ず見つけてやる。ジム。い
つの日かかけがえのない友を救わねばならぬ。オリハルコンの眼が奇跡を起こすだろう。
今がまさにその時だ。
Jim is willing to put his life on the line to rescue him from the Supreme King. Even though he is unsuccessful, he entrusts the task to O'Brien. When O'Brien finally confronts the Supreme King, he holds the Orichalcumai that belonged to Jim and used it when he forced the draw against the Supreme King.
だが俺も最後の作戦を発動させている。
With new voices finally able to reach Judai, Jim brings him back from the darkness. In the journey to save Johan, Judai needs his friends more than ever before. Jim proves your friends sometimes need kindness returned to them. Ryu shows that you need to preach the gospel and tell them what they need to hear and not be coddled. There are others that also stepped in when needed. Edo tries to calm down Judai when he awakens from his nightmares after being saved from the Supreme King. Misawa tells Judai that he needs to embrace both the light and dark sides of himself to continue moving forward. O'Brien faces his own fears and recognizes that he needs to be selfless much the same way Judai was during the first half of the season. Different attempts and different approaches were made to make sure that Judai had the support he needed. The major turning point for him was the duel between Ryu and Dark Johan. Ryu knows that he has limited time due to his heart condition worsening in the Dark World, and he will not live much longer. He pushes himself to see the duel out to make sure Judai sees that he needs tenacity and courage to face the remaining trial. Not only does Judai understand the message, he also understands that Ryu was trying to live life to the fullest to reach the ultimate duel. After Ryu passes away, Instructor Kronos and Sho continue walking with Judai to face Dark Johan. Sho understands that he needs to follow through with his own vow to see Judai's fate until the end. Everything that they had done to try to save Johan culminates with Judai successfully using Super Poly to fuse Neos and Rainbow Dragon. Judai goes after Yubel to put an end to the terror and Sho chases after him.
10代の戦いを最後まで見届けるって。
The meek friend that was in the shadow of Judai has now become one of the few remaining sources of light. He travels to the final duel location where Judai is and reveals that there is a possibility for everyone to be saved. Manjome, Asuka, Kenzan, Fubuki, Edo, Jim, and O'Brien can all come back. With this information in mind, Judai not only duels more aggressively, but with more hope. As the duel begins to reach its conclusion, Judai bids farewell to Sho.
ガッチャ。
Sho overcomes his negative emotions and refers to Judai as his brother again. When he disappears, Sho is the one that eagerly awaits his return. Sho has not given up hope that Judai will come back. Food is placed on the table for Judai, and it just so happens to be his favorite dish from Osiris Red. The power of friendship in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX teaches us that you are not ever really alone. When you have a support group like the one Judai had throughout the season, there will always be someone to pick you up. It won't always be in the ways that you think or even in the ways that you want. But when you create a bond that is strong with someone, you can always count on them. An in-person, online, work, or school friendship can transform into something that you can cherish. Don't let someone tell you otherwise. An anime about card games can teach you this. So imagine what you can learn from the bonds you create.